Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Empowered Pause. I am your host, Rachel Chinoa J. It's been a while. It's been a few months since we've been together. First, before I get started, let me make sure that we are sharing on all of the proper peripherals. So give me a half a second here because technology is our friend most days. Okay, I have you here. Awesome. And one more time. Let's see. Yes, I am here. So we are everywhere. It's since we've been together that let's make that ring on all of the proper. Sorry about that. So technology is our friend is until we actually start needing it to be quiet. So, good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Empowered Pause. If this is your first time here, my name is Rachel Chinoa J again, and I am the founder and executive director of engagement for Speak Initiative. Speak Initiative is a mental health peer support organization, and Speak stands for Suicide Prevention through Empowerment, Action, and Kindness. So, through those three philosophies, we like to encourage people, empower people, advocate for suicide prevention, and educate the community as well. So today, there's going to be a little different. First, I have different hair. The last time you guys probably saw me, I had locks, and it's a new year, it's a new season. It's about to be another spring in a few days. So I'm looking forward to that. So the format of the Empower Pause will change just a little bit. We'll still be with you live, but it will only be every other week as we work on a podcast that we're putting together as well. So hopefully we'll be able to launch those things in the next month of next few weeks, but just stay tuned and we will be posting all of the activities and all of the initiatives we have going on right now. So now that we've done the house cleaning, today I want to talk about a topic that I really expressed touched on before because it shows a level of vulnerability that I am not always comfortable with, right? And sometimes we don't want to be vulnerable because we have on our armor and we are focused forward and doing the things that we need to do, but we are all vulnerable at one time or another in our lives, right? So, imposter syndrome. This is something that I believe I have been experiencing for a very long time. And I'm going to share an article with you, and we'll talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, what it is, how it shows up. And then a treat for you guys is that on Saturday, this Saturday, 15th, March 15th at 5 p.m., I will be live on Instagram with a peer support partner of mine, A. Marie, and we'll be continuing the conversation about imposter syndrome, things that you can do, real life examples of how you can cope with this psychological condition, and start feeling better about the things that you're doing in your life that are actually, they're good, right? Sometimes we work ourselves so hard that we don't realize the amount of work we're really doing. We don't pause like this segment says. We do not pause and take a moment to recognize that we are accomplishing things. We are checking off things off our boxes, right? So I'm going to share this article. It's not too long. And then we will follow up back on Saturday and be able to have a conversation, a deeper conversation, because that live will be an hour. So hopefully we'll have participants who have questions and we can be a little more interactive that way. So that would be awesome. If you are able or interested in joining us on Instagram on Saturday, it will be at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and right on Speak Initiative's Instagram page. We'll try to see if I can actually stream it to other platforms, but right now we're only working with Instagram. Okay. I see a couple of people watching. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you being here. I see familiar names. I'm really glad to see you. Happy New Year, even though it's 3 months in already. Again, this is my first live since October, actually. We took a break for the holiday. And then for the new year, I had to recalibrate and take care of myself, take care of home a little bit. And so while we are growing this organization, you know, there's the inevitable chance of growth for the people involved. So I am welcoming the growth that comes with being a part of a community that wants to serve and wants to help people. Okay, so we are going to get, excuse me, we're going to get into this article. I'm not going to read the whole thing because, again, we're going to talk a little bit more about it on Saturday, right? So the article is titled, Is Imposter Syndrome Holding You Back from Living Your Best Life, right? This article comes from verywellmind.com, and it's been medically reviewed, and some of the information in there is really helpful. So hopefully it will be helpful to you as well. So they asked the question, have you ever find yourself consistently experiencing self-doubt in areas where you typically excel? Do you often feel like a fake or a phony despite all of your accomplishments? Because same. I felt like that in the recent past, and actually pretty much most of my life, which is why I've been an overachiever and I excel and I'm a perfectionist and all of these things. And we'll get into the different types of imposter syndromes that there are, right? In fact, it's a common phenomenon called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome may feel like nervousness accompanied by the belief that you'll be found out, and it may manifest as negative self talk. Symptoms of anxiety and depression often accompany imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is not a diagnosable mental illness. Instead, the term is usually narrowly applied to intelligence and achievement, although it also has links to perfectionism and the social context. It can also show up in the context of work, relationships, friendships, or just overall that holds us back from the self confidence we've earned and deserve to feel. There's a psychologist by the name of Susanna Imes and another psychologist by the name of Paula Rose Clance, who first used the term in the 1970s. So prior to 1970, no one was talking about imposter syndrome. We were not really doing a lot when it come before that. When it came to mental health care, there were really crude beliefs about people who suffered in different ways. So in the 1970s, people started to become a little more aware and conscious, and imposter syndrome was noticed in a lot of people, right? So the irony is that people with imposter syndrome are often highly accomplished, impressive individuals. On the outside, there's no apparent reason for them to feel like an imposter, yet they still do. This is what makes it such a challenging psychological phenomenon that needs to be unpacked. Not only can imposter syndrome affect your internal feelings about your work or self worth, but it can also actually affect the way you approach projects, relationships, or any other areas in which you are feeling insecure, explains Hannah Owens, who is a LMSW, which is a licensed master of social work. This essentially creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is what makes it so insidious and necessary to address when it arises. Now, there are 5 types of imposter syndrome that I'm just going to go over very quickly. And then there's the question, do you know if you have imposter syndrome? So the 5 types are, number 1 is the perfectionist. This type of imposter syndrome involves believing that unless you're absolutely perfect, you could have done better. You feel like an imposter because your perfectionistic traits make you believe that you are not as good as others may think you are, right? That's the perfectionist. I'm pretty sure you probably hear the ice cream truck outside. I'm in New York. This is what happens. I hope it's not distracting, but I had to acknowledge that. Number two, the expert. The expert feels like an imposter because they don't know everything there is to know about a particular subject or topic, or they haven't mastered every step in a process, right? Because there's more of them to it's more for them to learn. They don't feel as if they've reached the rank of expert yet, right? But there's always more to learn. That's the hiccup with that. We're never going to be a full expert of anything because you always can learn more. Number three is the natural genius. And in this imposter syndrome type, you may feel like a fraud simply because you don't believe that you're naturally intelligent or competent. If you don't get something right for the first time around, or it takes you longer to master a skill, you feel like an imposter. Number four is the soloist. It's also possible to feel like an imposter if you had to ask for help to reach a certain level or status. Since you couldn't, um, since you couldn't get there on your own, you question your competence or abilities. And the last type of imposter syndrome is the super person. This type of imposter involves believing that you must be the hardest worker or reach the highest levels of achievement possible. And if you don't, then you are a fraud. These things, and they come up for a lot of us. I'm not going to say every one of us has these experiences, but I know for a fact I've had some of those thoughts and some of those feelings, right? Now, I'm just going to go over what does it feel like? What does it feel like to have imposter syndrome? And I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact. And then I'm going to end because the rest of this information I'd like to deep dive in on Saturday when we have that live conversation on Instagram. Okay, so I'm skipping a section only because I don't want to open up a can of worms just yet. We don't have time tonight, but we will have a lot of time on Saturday. So, what does imposter syndrome feel like? Some common characteristics of imposter syndrome include an inability to realistically assess your competence and skills. Next is attributing your success to external factors that have nothing to do with you. Berating your performance, fear that you won't live up to expectations, overachieving, sabotaging your own success, self-doubt, and then setting very challenging goals and feeling disappointed when you fall short. Now, I know I'm not the only one who has experienced one or more of these at some time or another in our lives, right? It For some people, imposter syndrome can fuel motivation to achieve, but this is usually coming at the cost of experiencing constant anxiety, right? You might over prepare for work, um, or you work much harder than necessary, for instance, just to make sure nobody finds out that you're a fraud. Eventually, anxiety worsens that, and it may lead to depression. This is the impact of imposter syndrome, right? This sets up a vicious cycle in which you think that the only reason you survived that class presentation was that you stayed up all night rehearsing. Or you think the only reason you got through that party or family gathering was that you memorized details about all of the guests, so you would always have ideas for small talk. The problem with imposter syndrome is that the experience of doing well at something does nothing to change your beliefs, right? The thought still nags in your head, what gives me the right to be here? The more you accomplish, the more you just feel like a fraud. It's as though you can't internalize your experience of success. Now, this makes sense in terms of social anxiety if you received early feedback that you were not good in social or performance situations. Your core beliefs about yourself are so strong that they don't change, even when there's evidence to the contrary, right? The thought process is that if you do well, it must be the result of luck. Now, because imposter syndrome eats at you from the inside out, often with no outward signs of struggle, it makes it all the more important to recognize what's going on and to take steps to address these feelings, right? So otherwise, your feelings of incompetence may prevent you from, say, pursuing a professional goal that might actually be right for you, which could lead to more regret and more negative self-talk, right? So we know that imposter syndrome is not a healthy experience. It's not a healthy phenomenon. We also know that a lot of the statements that I brought up are statements that a lot of us have said or felt at one time or another. That does not mean, just because you felt like that at one time that you have imposter syndrome. This is when it's prolonged feelings and it's continuous negative self-talk, and you are not able to look at your accomplishments as they are accomplishments because there is so much more to do. I know I'm guilty of this, and I'm working on it. And believe me, this is why we chose the topic of imposter syndrome today, because this is the first thing we wanted to do coming back into a new year. The charge on my side is to bring information, empower the community who we share this information with, advocate, and also encourage people to live, right? I am in no way perfect. I am in no way, I might be special to some people, but I'm a human being like everyone else. And I am actually okay with saying that I've experienced some of these things. And I believe that I may not be alone in that way, right? So imposter syndrome, it exists. It is real. We know what it is now. And on Saturday, when we take the deep dive, we'll talk about some real life examples, what causes imposter syndrome, and then some ways that we can actually cope with imposter syndrome. Okay, so this has been a little longer Empowered Pause than it usually is, but it's our first day back. It's a new year. I have new hair. So we've decided to do something a little different, but I really appreciate you joining tonight. I hope that this information resonates with you, or if it's not with you, maybe you can share it with someone who it may be helpful for. Again, thank you for being here. Until next time, take care.